My name is Linda Hawthorne, and the day everything began, I thought I was just getting the furnace fixed. It was late November in Willow Creek, Michigan, that gray kind of cold that seeps through your bones before the snow even falls. The house felt emptier than usual since George died last year, but I'd gotten used to the quiet hum of the vents. Or maybe I'd convinced myself it was comforting. That morning, the hum stopped. No air, no warmth, just silence, so I called a repairman. When Tom, a local guy with rough hands and an easy smile, came by, he said it would be a quick job. He disappeared down the basement stairs while I made coffee, the sound of his boots echoing under the floor. Then came the scream. Not loud, but raw, a sound dragged out of someone's chest. I dropped the mug. The crash barely registered before I heard him whisper almost to himself, "I'm calling the police." My heart seized. I rushed to the stairs. "Tom, what is it? What's wrong?" He turned toward me, face pale as drywall flashlight trembling in his hand. "Ma'am," he stammered, "please, don't come down here." Of course I did. The air in the basement was thick, metallic, stale, with a faint burnt smell that shouldn't have been there. The furnace door hung open, the metal edges blackened and warped. Tom's phone was pressed to his ear. "Yeah," he said into it, voice cracking. "Willow Creek Drive. Found something. Inside the furnace vent." I froze halfway down the steps. "Found what?" He looked at me, eyes wide and terrified. "I think it's human." I couldn't breathe. My hand gripped the railing until my knuckles went white. "Human." He stepped away from the furnace, the flashlight beam shaking across the concrete. Inside the open panel, I saw something dark and twisted, fused into the metal like it had been there forever. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Tom said quietly, "please go upstairs. Now." I did as he asked, but my legs felt like water. The hum was gone, replaced by a hollow silence that seemed to stretch through every wall. It wasn't long before I heard sirens. Red and blue lights flashed against the snow-dusted windows. 2 officers came in, polite but tense, asking questions in careful tones. I could barely answer. They went down with Tom. The minutes dragged. When they came back up, their faces told me everything before their words did. "Mrs. Hawthorne," the older officer said, "we'll need to treat your basement as a potential crime scene." I stared at him, trying to make sense of the words. "A crime scene? No, that can't be. My husband built that furnace himself." "That's exactly why we need to take a closer look," he said. Behind him, Tom stood, rigid, eyes fixed on the floor. I realized then he hadn't looked me in the eye since he made the call. The officer continued, voice low. "We'll have a detective here soon. In the meantime, please stay upstairs. Do you have somewhere else you can go tonight?" I shook my head automatically. "No, this is my home." He nodded sympathetically. "Just try not to go down there again." When they left to wait outside for forensics, I sat at the kitchen table staring at George's empty coffee mug still sitting by the sink. My husband had been gone for over a year. A heart attack, they said. Quick, peaceful. I'd buried him with a folded flag and a preacher's promise that the dead rest easy. But sitting there, I realized I didn't know what rest easy even meant anymore. Because something under my house had just started to wake up. And I had no idea what it was trying to tell me. By the time Detective Alvarez arrived, dusk had swallowed Willow Creek Drive. The blue strobes from the patrol cars painted the snow in sick colors, pulsing against the porch. She stepped in with calm authority, mid-40s, dark hair, pinned tight, coat still dusted with sleet. Her tone was measured, practiced. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I'm Detective Alvarez. I understand the discovery was made in your basement." I nodded, gripping a mug of untouched tea. They said it looked human. Her eyes softened a fraction. "We're treating it as a possible remains recovery until forensics confirms. May I ask who built the furnace?" "My husband, George. He was an engineer. Built it himself 15 years ago." Her pen paused. 15 years. The echo of that number felt heavier than it should have. She asked permission to go downstairs. I hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead. From the kitchen I could hear their boots on the concrete, the low murmur of radios. Then a voice called up, Detective, you'll want to see this. Alvarez returned 20 minutes later, face unreadable. She peeled off her gloves with slow precision. We found a sealed compartment welded into the furnace shell. Looks deliberate. The material's some kind of alloy, heat-resistant industrial grade. I blinked. George worked with alloys. He said he was designing something that would never rust. She jotted that down. Did he ever mention his brother Harold? That name cut through the fog. Of course. He disappeared years ago. 2008. Yes. Thanksgiving weekend. They fought over their father's estate. Alvarez nodded. We found bone fragments consistent with an adult male. Too early to confirm age, but the timeline fits. I gripped the edge of the table. You're saying that's Harold? I'm saying we'll know soon. My throat went dry. I could still picture that last Thanksgiving, George and Harold arguing after the Lions game, beer bottles clinking, the cold air carrying words that burned hotter than the fireplace. Harold had been the louder one, but George's silence was worse. He came inside later, calm as ice, and said only, "He's gone. Don't ask." I hadn't. Now I wished I had. Alvarez sat across from me. We'll need access to your husband's workshop. Tools, schematics, anything related to the furnace. I led her downstairs. The police had already cordoned off the area, cameras flashing. The smell was thick, metallic, and bitter, laced with something faintly sweet like old smoke. The furnace sat gutted, its metal skin peeled open. Beneath the lighting, I saw it, a small chamber lined with scorched insulation, almost clinical in its precision. Whoever built it hadn't improvised, they'd planned it. Alvarez crouched, shining her flashlight inside. He engineered this to contain heat and to hide what the heat consumed. I felt dizzy. He was meticulous. Always said safety was about control. She looked at me, then steady. When control becomes obsession, it's not safety anymore. They bagged fragments, labeled evidence, photographed every angle. Before they sealed it, Alvarez handed something to an officer, a small ring, warped but recognizable. 2 engraved letters caught the light, HH. I didn't need to say it aloud. Back upstairs, she filled out forms while I stared at George's old leather chair by the window. His reading glasses still sat on the side table as if he might pick them up any second. Mrs. Hawthorne, Alvarez said softly, "We'll run DNA and dental records. You'll be kept updated. For now, you can stay elsewhere while we process the scene." "I'm fine here," I said, though. My voice sounded far away. She studied me a moment. Sometimes the mind protects us by refusing to believe. Don't fight that tonight. Just rest. When she left, the silence collapsed in around me. The vents were dead. Yet I swore I heard a faint knock from somewhere in the walls, a rhythmic tap, like someone politely asking to be let out. I told myself it was pipes, old metal cooling, nothing more. But then the smell came, faint, acrid, the scent of burnt oil mixed with something human, something that didn't belong. I turned off the lights and stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring into the dark. The air below shimmered faintly like heat rising from an invisible fire. For a moment I thought I saw movement, a shadow crossing where the furnace had been, taller than George, thinner. I blinked and it was gone. I shut the door and locked it. That night I dreamt of George's hands, calloused, careful, fitting metal to metal, sealing something tight, while a man screamed from inside. The hammer blows turned into that same faint tapping. And when I woke, the sound was still there. Morning came, gray and brittle, the kind of light that made everything look like it was made of ash. I sat at the kitchen table, clutching my phone, staring at the contact saved as Detective Alvarez. I didn't call. Not yet. Not until I was sure. Because sometime around 3 in the morning, after the tapping stopped, I'd gone back down there. I told myself it was stupid, dangerous. But the not knowing was worse. The police tape stretched across the basement door was easy to peel away. The metal stairs were cold under my bare feet. I could still smell the soot. The furnace looked smaller now that it was dead, like a body after the soul's gone. They'd taken most of the evidence, but in the far corner behind George's tool cabinet, I noticed something I hadn't before: a faint seam in the wall, a perfect vertical line that caught the light differently. My heart thudded. I remembered George's voice years ago warning me, "Never touch the tool cabinet, Lynn. Dangerous materials." I had listened like a fool. I pulled the cabinet away, the metal feet screeching against the floor. The wall behind it had a rectangular hatch bolted shut. Not drywall steel. The same alloy Alvarez mentioned. My hands shook as I found George's old screwdriver set. When the last bolt dropped to the floor, I pulled the panel open. Inside was a narrow compartment lined with plastic sheeting. A single object sat inside a tin box. It rattled when I lifted it. Upstairs, I wiped the soot from its lid. Inside were yellowed photos: George and Harold as kids standing in front of their father's workshop. A folded check from 2008 made out to Harold Hawthorne for $40,000. And at the bottom, a small cassette tape labeled in George's familiar handwriting. "For when I'm gone." I hesitated only a second before finding my old tape player in the hall closet. When I pressed play, George's voice came through, rough and weary but unmistakably him. "Linda, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it through the fire. Maybe that's for the best. There's something you deserve to know." Static cracked. My hand went numb around the recorder. "Harold didn't just want money. He wanted you. That night he came to the house drunk, said you'd chosen wrong. He laughed, said you'd come crawling back when I couldn't give you a family. I told him to leave. He wouldn't. He swung first." I swallowed hard, my vision blurred. I didn't mean to hit him that hard, but when he fell, I knew it was bad. The blood was everywhere, and he wasn't breathing. I panicked. I told myself I'd call someone, but then I thought of you, of what it would do to you if they took me away. A long pause. I could hear him breathing. So I did what I do best. I fixed it. I sealed the furnace with a custom alloy, heat-resistant enough to hide what I couldn't bury. No one would ever smell it, ever see it. It would be safe. Safe! The word echoed until it made me sick. But it didn't stay quiet. Some nights when the heat kicked in, I swear I could hear him. The pipes would moan, the walls would creak, and I'd hear Harold whisper my name. I thought it was guilt. But maybe it wasn't. Static swallowed the rest. Then came one final breath close to the mic. "You have to believe me, Linda. I did it for us." Then silence. I didn't realize I was crying until the tape clicked off. For a long time, I sat there, the weight of his words pressing down. The truth had a sound now, the hiss of static, the breath of a ghost. I called Alvarez. She answered on the second ring. "I found something," I said. "A tape. From George." Her tone sharpened. "You didn't enter the basement, did you?" I hesitated. "I did." A sigh. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I told you not to disturb the scene." "I had to," I said quietly. "He left something for me." When she arrived an hour later, she photographed the box, the tape, everything. She bagged them carefully, marking each label. Chain of custody. Official. Impersonal. I watched her work while my husband's voice still echoed in my ears. "Detective," I said, "he said he heard Harold in the walls. What if he wasn't just imagining it?" She glanced at me. "Guilt can do strange things to the mind." "But what if it wasn't guilt?" Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I gestured toward the basement door. "Last night I heard it too." She paused, notebook half closed. "Heard what?" A voice, I whispered. It said his name. We stared at each other. She didn't believe me, I could see it. But she also didn't dismiss me. "I'll have the sound team sweep the ducts," she said finally. "Probably old air pockets or a loose vent." I nodded, though we both knew how empty that sounded. After she left, I turned the heat back on for the first time in days. The system groaned to life, air rushing through the vents. At first it was normal. Then came a sound, faint, rhythmic, like two voices arguing far below. I turned it off again. and in the sudden silence the house exhaled a long, hollow sigh through the walls. That's when I realized something. George had built that furnace to hide Harold. But maybe Harold never really left. The first time I heard it clearly, I was wide awake. It was past midnight, the kind of hour where the world feels like it's holding its breath. I'd been lying on the couch staring at the ceiling, waiting for the furnace to kick in. I told myself I wanted to make sure it still worked, but deep down I was listening for something else. The hum started low and steady, that same mechanical rhythm I'd lived with for 15 years. Only this time underneath it I heard words. A whisper carried by the vents. At first it was just a breath, Linda. I sat up so fast the blanket fell to the floor. The voice was faint, but it was there, traveling through the air ducts like smoke. George Thorne whispered back before I could stop myself. The vent hissed a metallic rattle, then silence. I laughed nervously, rubbing my arms against the chill. Get a grip, I muttered. It's the house settling. That's all. But the next night it came again. This time it wasn't just a whisper. It was an argument, muffled, harsh, as though two men were fighting through the walls. One voice low and steady, the other sharp, furious. The sound came from the vent near the hallway. I crawled closer, my pulse hammering. You said she'd never find out. Then a reply, deeper, strained. You don't understand, Harold. The air turned colder, the metal of the vent vibrating under my fingertips. Stop it, I whispered. You're not real. A laugh echoed back, a dry, hollow sound that wasn't quite human. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall. The voices stopped. The silence afterward was worse. The next morning, I called Detective Alvarez again. She arrived an hour later, notebook in hand, her eyes sharp but kind. You said the voices are coming from the vents. Yes, I said, gesturing toward the hallway. You have to hear it. They argue it sounds like them. Like George and Harold. She didn't roll her eyes or call me crazy. Instead, she crouched by the vent listening. After a few seconds, she shook her head. I don't hear anything. It only happens at night, I said. When it's cold. When the furnace is running. She stood up, brushing off her knees. We'll have an audio technician inspect it just in case. But Mrs. Hawthorne? Her tone softened. You've been through a trauma. The mind can fill silence with memory. It's how it protects itself. I know what I heard, I said quietly. She gave a small nod, not arguing. Try to get some rest. Leave the heat off for now. After she left, the house felt heavier, as if it resented being doubted. I sat in George's old chair by the window, the afternoon light cutting pale across the carpet. His glasses were still there. His ashtray. His smelled tobacco and engine oil lingered faintly in the fabric. I should have thrown those things out months ago, but every time I tried, something in me hesitated, like part of him was still watching. That evening, I turned the heat on again, not out of defiance, but because the cold hurt my hands. The hum returned, and this time the whisper came immediately. He's lying, Linda. I froze. The voice wasn't George's. It was thinner, raspier, full of pain. He burned me alive. My blood turned to ice. I stumbled to the thermostat and slammed the switch off, but the vent kept humming. You trusted him. I covered my ears, backing into the wall. Stop. He told you I was gone, but I was right here. All along. The whisper broke into static, like air being sucked through a vacuum. Then silence. I ran outside in my robe, breath clouding in the night air, and didn't stop until I reached the neighbor's driveway. The cold didn't matter. The quiet didn't matter. Only distance did. The next morning, I packed a small bag and checked into a motel near town. But sleep didn't come. The hum followed me in the fridge, the air conditioner, even the pipes. A low, vibrating memory that refused to die. By the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove back to the house, headlights cutting through the fog. When I opened the front door, the air inside was warm. The thermostat was on, though I'd turned it off before leaving. I should have called Alvarez. I should have run. But instead, I followed the sound down the basement stairs. The furnace door was open again. The metal glowed faintly red though the switch was off. Inside the darkness shimmered not with heat, but with movement. A face took shape in the glow, skeletal warped its features, half melted. But the eyes were human. And they were looking right at me. Linda, it whispered, he lied to you. I stumbled back, slamming into the wall. The vision flickered once, twice, then vanished. I ran upstairs and locked the basement door. By morning, the heat had gone out again. But when I walked past the vent, a faint breath escaped it, cold and steady. A voice followed, barely audible, like a sigh through iron. Don't let him rest. By the time the first snow fell, the house had gone completely silent again. No hum, no whispers, just stillness. But it didn't feel like peace. It felt like the pause before a scream. I'd been living out of a suitcase in my own home, sleeping on the couch with the lights on like a child afraid of the dark. Alvarez still called every few days, though I could tell she was losing patience with my stories. The ducts are clear, she said during her last visit. No gas leaks, no structural vibration. The techs found nothing. Then what did I hear, I asked. She hesitated. Sometimes grief plays tricks. You've lost a husband, discovered a body, and learned your entire marriage wasn't what you thought. That's enough to make anyone question reality. I wanted to argue, but I didn't. Because part of me was questioning it. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe that's what grief really does. It hollowed you out until anything could echo inside. Still, every time I walked past that basement door, the air felt colder. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. Outside, Willow Creek Drive was quiet. No sirens, no curious neighbors. Everyone had moved on, labeling my home as just another old house with a story. Around midnight, I heard the furnace switch click. I froze. I hadn't touched the thermostat in days. Then came the hum. Low at first, then louder, like something alive awakening. I stood heart hammering, staring toward the basement door. Smoke began seeping from the vent in the living room, faint at first, then curling like fingers. I coughed, covering my mouth. The smell wasn't like burning wood. It was sweet, heavy like burnt hair. George Thuray whispered, though I didn't know why. And from the vent came a sound I hadn't heard in a year, his voice weak but familiar. Linda, please help me. I dropped the glass. Wine splattered across the carpet like blood. I didn't mean for it to end this way, the voice said, shaking with static. You have to forgive me. It won't stop otherwise. Then another voice cut in, rougher, jagged like broken metal. Don't listen to him. The lights flickered. The vent rattled violently, the hum rising to a roar. I stumbled back, tripping over the rug. Smoke filled the room, darker now. I could hear them both, George pleading, Harold mocking. You burned me alive. I didn't mean to liar. The air thickened until I could barely see. My lungs burned. I ran toward the basement, covering my face with my sleeve. Stop it, I screamed. Both of you, just stop. The furnace door downstairs glowed red-hot light, bleeding through the seams like veins of molten metal. The temperature was unbearable. I could feel the heat pulsing against my skin, even from the stairs. In the roar, I heard a sound, something between a sob and a laugh. You never asked, Linda, George's voice said. You just believed me. I stumbled closer, shouting over the noise. You lied to me. You killed your brother. For you, he screamed back. He wanted you. He said he had you first. You think I could live with that? My stomach turned. That was the truth then. Not money, not inheritance. Jealousy. Betrayal. He wasn't the only one burning, George said. Every day I lived with what I did. You just never saw it. The hum grew into a violent rumble. The metal began to bend inward as though something inside was trying to claw its way out. I turned to run, but the basement door slammed shut behind me. You let him hide me, Harold's voice hissed. Now you'll hear us both. The furnace exploded open. A rush of heat knocked me to the ground. Flames licked the ceiling, dancing in shapes that almost looked like faces, one furious, one pleading. George and Harold locked in their eternal argument, their voices now one endless howl through the fire. I crawled toward the stairs, coughing the air thick with smoke. My eyes burned. From somewhere inside the blaze, George shouted, "Go, Linda, go!" And for a heartbeat, I thought I saw him, his outline in the flames, reaching for me not to pull me down, but to push me away. I scrambled up the stairs, slamming through the kitchen door just as the heat burst through the floor vents. Outside, the snow had turned black with ash. I collapsed on the front lawn, gasping, the glow of the fire painting the windows red behind me. Neighbors ran from their houses shouting, "Someone called 911." I didn't move. I just stared at the house, at the flickering light in the windows that looked almost alive. In the roar of the fire, I could still hear them, the two voices blending together until I couldn't tell one from the other. And then finally silence. By the time the fire department arrived, the furnace had melted down to a shell. The rest of the house was mostly intact, smoke damage but standing. Alvarez found me on the curb wrapped in a blanket. "What happened?" she asked, eyes scanning the charred basement windows. "I turned the heat on," I said flatly, "and they turned on me." She frowned. "Who?" I looked at her. "You already know." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't press further. "They ruled it an electrical malfunction, but I knew better." The house had purged itself. And somewhere in those melted pipes, in that cursed alloy George built to hide his sin, the voices had finally stopped. Or maybe they'd just found a quieter way to whisper. The fire didn't destroy everything. I almost wished it had. A week later, the house stood there on Willow Creek Drive, half burned but stubbornly intact, the blackened skeleton of the furnace visible through the cracked basement window like a wound that refused to heal. They said it was an accident. Old wiring, according to the report. Alvarez didn't sound convinced, but she didn't argue with the official story. Sometimes the truth just doesn't fit into paperwork. I was staying in a temporary apartment then, a sterile, too-bright place across town. The hum of the refrigerator replaced the hum of the furnace, but it wasn't the same. I still jumped at every mechanical noise. Alvarez visited once more, her coat smelling faintly of rain. She carried a sealed evidence bag, inside it the warped remains of George's cassette tape. "It survived the fire," she said, "barely." I stared at the melted plastic, the label still faintly visible for "When I'm Gone." "They pulled this out of what was left of the furnace," Alvarez continued. "There was another tape behind it, unlabeled." She set it on the table. The casing was scorched but intact. My throat tightened. "Another one." She nodded. "We haven't played it. Thought you might want to hear it first." I hesitated. "Shouldn't it be in evidence?" "It will be," she said softly, "but sometimes hearing the truth helps people breathe again." I stared at the blackened tape for a long time before slipping it into my old player. The machine whirred, sputtered, and then the sound came. Not static. Not George's voice. Something else. "You can't bury what won't die." It was Harold. I knew it instantly. The same rasp I'd heard through the vents. He thought the fire would cleanse him. It didn't. It only set me free. I froze, my pulse pounding in my throat. Alvarez leaned closer, frowning, probably thinking it was some kind of background distortion. "You're listening now, aren't you, Linda?" I stopped breathing. "He burned me for you. Now he burns with me. And you, static burst, you'll never stop hearing us." The tape clicked off. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Alvarez exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. "That's not possible. It's interference. A damaged reel." But I knew better. The voice had said my name. I ejected the tape and slid it across the table. "Take it," I whispered. "I don't want it." She nodded, sealing it back in the bag. "We'll have the lab analyze it. Audio contamination happens all the time." When she left, the silence felt too deep, too deliberate. That night, I dreamed of fire again, only this time it wasn't consuming the house. It was shaping something new. I saw George in the flames, face calm, eyes sad. He was holding out his hands, palms upward, as if offering me something invisible. Then another figure appeared behind him, Harold, his outline darker, shifting like smoke. They stood side by side staring at me. Two brothers. One secret. Choose, Harold whispered. Who do you believe? I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart clawing against my ribs. The room was dark, but the faint orange glow from the streetlight painted the ceiling like flickering firelight. Somewhere behind the wall, the heater kicked on. Just a normal sound, ordinary, harmless. But then faintly, almost lovingly, I heard it again. Linda. I threw the blankets off and unplugged the heater. The hum died instantly. The silence afterward was deafening. The next morning, Alvarez called. Linda, she said carefully, we ran the tape through multiple filters. The voice you heard, it's not interference. I gripped the phone tighter. Then what is it? There was a pause. It's layered audio. Two voices spliced together. The top layer matches your husband's. The lower frequency. She hesitated. It doesn't match anyone in our system. Not Harold. No. What does that mean? It means someone or something recorded over his confession after the fire. I didn't speak, couldn't. Do you still have the furnace remnants? I asked finally. Evidence storage, she said. Why? Because I need to see them. A few hours later, I was back in the burned house. Alvarez let me in with a flashlight and a warning. The air still smelled like smoke and rust. The furnace was nothing but a collapsed husk of twisted metal. But when I crouched near it, I noticed something in the soot, faint markings carved into the alloy, half melted yet still legible. Linda. My name, scored into the steel. Alvarez crouched beside me. You think he wrote that? No, I whispered. I think he answered him. She frowned. Who? I looked at her, my voice shaking. Harold. The beam of her flashlight trembled. You mean... I mean it's not over, I said. The house isn't done talking. I stood brushing soot from my hands. The air felt heavy, humming with faint vibration, a familiar rhythm crawling back through the pipes that shouldn't even be connected anymore. I glanced toward the vent, half expecting to hear words, but none came. Just that steady pulse like a dying heart refusing to quit. Alvarez's radio crackled suddenly, making both of us jump. Dispatch to Alvarez, do you copy audio interference on your line? Her face went pale. We're clear, she said quickly. Just wrapping up. But I saw it, the flicker in her eyes. She'd heard it too. As we left, I turned back toward the furnace one last time. The metal was still faintly warm, as though something deep inside it was alive again. And for the first time, I understood what George meant on his tape. It didn't stay quiet. That night, I didn't go home to the apartment. I drove until dawn through empty highways dusted with snow, until the hum in my head finally quieted. But even as the sun came up, part of me knew it wasn't over. The fire had changed something, freed something. And whatever it was, it still remembered my name. It's been 3 months since the fire, and I still can't stand the smell of metal. They say trauma lingers in the senses, that the body keeps score even when the mind tries to forget. Maybe that's why I still wake up at night certain I can taste ash on my tongue or hear that faint mechanical hum vibrating through the quiet. But I don't live on Willow Creek Drive anymore. I sold the house to a young couple from Grand Rapids who fell in love with its character. They didn't ask about the fire. They just smiled and said they could feel the warmth when they walked inside. I almost warned them. Almost. But the words wouldn't come. Because how do you tell someone the warmth they feel might not be theirs? My new place is an apartment overlooking the river. The air smells like water and concrete, not smoke. The heater is modern, all electric. No vents, no ducts, just quiet, predictable warmth. I thought that would make me feel safe. It didn't. Because safety isn't about what's around you, it's about what follows you. Some nights I still hear them. Not loud, just whispers beneath the static of the city. When the elevator hums, when the pipes settle, when the refrigerator clicks on faint overlapping voices that sound too much like memory. You never asked. You believed him. You let me burn. I keep the radio on most nights. Country stations. Johnny Cash, just like George used to hum when he worked in the garage. Sometimes I even find myself singing along, pretending the voice beside me is just the echo of the song. But then the lights flicker, and I remember. A week ago, Alvarez called. She'd transferred to another county but wanted to close the loop. We got the final report, she said. The audio tape, both voices degraded. We couldn't reproduce what you heard. I almost laughed. You mean you couldn't record what I heard? She was quiet a moment. Then softly, do you think it's over? No, I said. You can't end something that never died. She didn't respond. I think she believed me. Later that night, I drove past Willow Creek. The street was calm, the snow untouched. My old house glowed warmly through new curtains. Someone had put a Christmas wreath on the door. For a second, it looked alive again, ordinary, domestic, harmless. But as I parked across the street, I saw something that froze me where I sat. A faint flicker through the basement window, a reddish light pulsing, not steady, not electrical, almost breathing. And just for an instant, I thought I saw them, two shadows against the wall, one tall, one thin, locked in endless argument. George and Harold. I blinked and they were gone. But the light remained a soft, rhythmic glow, like the heartbeat of something that refused to die. It's strange what memory becomes when you stop trying to forget it. Sometimes I think about that last night, about how George shouted for me to run, how his voice cracked with something between guilt and love. He wasn't a monster when I met him. He became one trying to protect what he thought was his. And maybe that's the cruelest truth of all: evil doesn't always come from hatred. Sometimes it comes from love that rots. I don't forgive him. Not because I can't, but because I won't. Forgiveness is for the living. George made his choice, and the house made sure it remembered. But me, I survived. I carry the story so no one else will have to breathe that kind of silence again. Sometimes I imagine that house standing long after I'm gone, the furnace sealed again, waiting. People will move in, feel its warmth, tell themselves it's just good insulation. And maybe it will be. Until one winter night the hum starts again. Until someone whispers a name through the vents. A few days ago, I recorded a new tape. Not a confession, not a goodbye, just a story. Mine. My name is Linda Hawthorne, I said, my voice steady. And this is what happens when the truth refuses to stay buried. I don't know if anyone will ever hear it, but I labeled it anyway, The House That Remembered. And sometimes late at night when the city goes quiet, I play it back. My own voice fills the room, calm, deliberate, like I'm haunting myself. Then, right as the tape ends, a second sound seeps through the static. A faint hum, soft but certain. The same note that once lived beneath my floorboards. And I swear, in that hum I hear two men still arguing, one voice, begging one, accusing both, forever trapped in the heat they created. Maybe that's their hell, or maybe it's mine. Either way, the house remembers. And now so will you.